I think it could come down very quickly if the opposition could find ways to find and develop splits among the top leadership. In the regular military, which has not a lot of love lost between it and the Revolutionary Guard, and even within the Revolutionary Guard, the rank and file know how bad conditions are in the country. Their families, their friends are experiencing it. And I think there are splits even among the Ayatollahs. So when the demonstrations were going on, if we had our act together with the opposition, we might have precipitated a collapse then. The next clear opportunity is when the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, dies. He's late 80s, not in good health by all accounts. He's only the second supreme leader, meaning they've only had one transition. There's a procedure that's spelled out how you pick the next supreme leader, but this is a matter of politics. There are no real solid precedents. And I think the idea that they could have a line of succession is a strategy that's come to an end. So when the Ayatollah Khamenei dies, I think that's a point of maximum stress for the regime.
Hello and welcome to the very first episode of the Middle East Report, your one-stop shop for all the news and analysis of events coming out of the region. And just hours ago, as Donald Trump launched his Board of Peace at the World Economic Forum in Davos, he said that Iran wants to hold talks with Washington and that Washington is open to having those talks. This comes after a month in which thousands have been killed by the regime as it cracked down on protesters. So where are we with the question of Iran? Joining us to discuss this is John Bolton. He was the National Security Advisor for Donald Trump during his very first term, and he joins us now. Hello to you.
Glad to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to ask firstly, what's your assessment of where we are with Iran?
Well, I think the big unknown that remains from the U.S. perspective is whether Trump will carry through on the threat he made during the demonstrations that if the regime continued to kill its own people, that he would use military force against it. Now, to me, it looks like Iran has crossed the red line and gotten away with it, which is a problem for Trump's credibility. But there is an argument that he simply didn't have enough U.S. forces in the region to take a meaningful action. I think those forces are coming together, and so the issue remains open. But basically, the pattern we've seen is that the demonstrations spread across the country. The Ayatollahs responded with crushing force, and that was the end of the demonstrations. I don't think that means the opposition's going away. I think, in fact, it's stronger now than at any point since the 1979 revolution, and there will be a reckoning here. But as of now, it looks like the Ayatollahs have lived to continue to run the country.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because Donald Trump, he said a variety of things in Iran, and including we know that there is an aircraft carrier now heading towards the Gulf. So what are the actual prospects of some form of US intervention, or at least some form of the deal with Iran?
Well, for Trump, a deal is always possible. That's what he lives for. There's nothing better than a deal. It's almost as though he doesn't care what the terms of the deal are, as long as he can announce he's made a deal. I don't think the prospects for that are very good. I don't believe this board of peace that he's created is going to have any influence there at all. And it really depends on what happens inside Iran. I do think that the weakness of the regime, the deep economic problems that they have, including a loss of water supply around the country, mean that we don't have a final answer to the situation on the ground. But time moves on, and Trump has a short attention span, so it may be diverted by other things in the next few weeks, which means probably no U.S. response.
There is an argument, and hear me out on this, there is an argument to say that a lot of Iranians wouldn't look very nicely to the concept of a foreign intervention, and it may in fact even create some sort of an anti-American feeling among the masses. Is that a fair argument to make?
Well, I know the argument's been made repeatedly, really for decades, as to why the U.S. should not attack Iran's nuclear weapons program. People said the country will rally to the regime, you'll make the regime stronger, you could have conflict all around the Middle East. Well, last year, along with Israel, we did attack Iran's nuclear weapons program. There was no broader conflict in the Middle East, and the people didn't rally around the regime. During these demonstrations, they were crying out, "Death to the Ayatollahs." I think they understood that the attacks were targeted at the nuclear weapons program, not at the people of Iran. And my sense is that it enhanced the feeling among the people in Iran that if the regime couldn't protect its most valuable assets, it just underlined that the regime's days were numbered. Not how it would come down or when, but just gave increased support for the idea that inevitably the regime will fall. I think what Trump was thinking of was targeted strikes, hopefully against the Revolutionary Guard, against headquarters and bases, and against the besieging militia that would weaken the capability of the regime to create mischief in the Middle East as a whole and to oppress the Iranian people, and that in turn would spur the morale of the opposition. Now, the right way to do this is for the U.S. to be in close contact with the opposition and say, look, what do you think? Not that we're going to tell them exactly when we're going to do it or that sort of thing, but get a sense what's going to help the opposition. That should be the objective here. I mean, I've been in favor of regime change in Iran for a long time. Trump was opposed to it in the first term, and he was up until a few weeks ago when he finally said it's time for new leadership. So the question is, how can we help the people in Iran who are trying to achieve that objective? It would be foolhardy to do something that sets them back.
Yeah, I was interested in that point because how exactly strategically does America get involved? Because Trump is adamant that he does not want to be troops in the ground guy. He doesn't want to be, he wants to be seen as this peacemaker president. So how do you exactly do that and not rupture the Middle East again? Because there is a legacy of ruptures in the Middle East, and you don't want Iran in some ways to fall even worse away.
Well, there's always risk, but I think there are 2 points that would minimize the potential broader damage. And this is something Arab states in the Gulf have said. Number one, certainly at the beginning, I would not attack religious targets. I would not go after the Ayatollahs. I would focus on military targets. And so as not to stir up any of the religious issues. And second, also of concern to the Gulf Arabs, in this first phase, certainly I would not attack oil infrastructure in Iran. The Arab oil producers have feared that they might be subject to Iran's retaliation, saying, well, if we can't ship oil out of the Gulf, neither will you. I think that's a legitimate concern, and I think you minimize that by not going after the infrastructure again, at least at the beginning.
And so there is, so in terms of the prospects then, how long do you give the Islamic Republic of Iran in terms of time? How realistic is its future now? Because it is at this weakest point since the revolution. That is just a reality. So how long do you really give it?
Well, I think it could come down very quickly if the opposition could find ways to find and develop splits among the top leadership. In the regular military, which has not a lot of love lost between it and the Revolutionary Guard, and even within the Revolutionary Guard, the rank and file know how bad conditions are in the country. Their families, their friends are experiencing it. And I think there are splits even among the Ayatollahs. So when the demonstrations were going on, if we had our act together with the opposition, we might have precipitated a collapse then. The next clear opportunity is when the supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, dies. He's late 80s, not in good health by all accounts. He's only the second supreme leader, meaning they've only had one transition. There's a procedure that's spelled out how you pick the next supreme leader, but this is a matter of politics. There are no real solid precedents. And I think the idea that they could have a line of succession is a strategy that's come to an end. So when the Ayatollah Khamenei dies, I think that's a point of maximum stress for the regime. That could be a moment for the opposition. They need to be doing preliminary work now, identifying who might come over to their side. That's something probably best left to the opposition without outside interference. But this is why we need to talk to the opposition, which is fragmented, doesn't have a leadership structure, which is a problem. But we should be talking to the opposition to say, how can we help the most?
One final point on this before we move on to the border peace. The Ayatollahs obviously would be looking for a successor to Ayatollah Khamenei, and there is an argument to say that, if there wasn't a clear successor, the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard Corps, would take office and it would basically become a military junta. Is that a realistic prospect?
Well, I mean, really, today it's as much a military dictatorship as it is a theocracy. It's the Revolutionary Guard that controls key sectors of the economy. They're in charge of the nuclear and ballistic missile programs. It's the Quds Force that has created these terrorist groups, created and supported these terrorist groups around the Middle East. Uh, so I would imagine that if it goes the wrong way, the Revolutionary Guard basically amasses all the power, probably with a couple of ayatollahs as camouflage. But I don't think that would be far different from what we have now. It's important to fracture the monopoly on force that the regime effectively now has, except maybe up in the Kurdish areas. And that's what intimidates the population, the civilians, perfectly understandably. Look at the brutality with which the protests were suppressed. That's why you need to split the military, split the Revolutionary Guard, and at that point, as I say, I think the rank and file, even under commanders loyal to the regime, say we're not going to fire on our fellow citizens.
So let's turn to the Board of Peace now. That was launched in the last few hours by Donald Trump at Davos. He's made himself the long-term chair, which means he's not changing hands of that organization. And it's got $1 billion entry. I mean, what does this tell us about the Board of Peace? Is it essentially there to replace the United Nations?
Uh, I would say with respect to the Security Council, there's not that much there to replace, so I wouldn't get too upset about it for that reason. But honestly, I think this is an entity that's never going to get off the ground. Its initial mission was obviously the reconstruction of Gaza, but until Hamas agrees to disarm and the entire Gaza Strip is demilitarized, the tunnel network that Hamas created is turned over to a civilian authority, all of the weapons caches are found and disabled. None of the subsequent steps in the peace plan are going to take place, and in particular, outside investors are not going to put their capital at risk in a very uncertain and dangerous environment. And Hamas is showing no sign they're preparing to demilitarize. If anything, we know that the regime in Tehran has been providing additional financing, even under the stress it's under, trying to help rebuild Hamas, Hezbollah, and some of the other terrorist groups. So I'm not sure the Board of Peace gets off the ground even with respect to Gaza, let alone with respect to everything else in the world that Trump seems to have in mind.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it started out as a body just to run Gaza. It's now got 3 layers and 4 committees, of which Tony Blair is one of them, and there's a committee to run Gaza and so on. But there is a wider point around US hegemony, which is now changing. It's been the relying force for a lot of the West in that time. But with this Board of Peace and essentially, people pandering to Trump, Trump using tariffs as a means to coerce allies, what are we seeing the formation of now? Is this just a sort of a Trump empire as opposed to a Trump Western-led hegemony?
Well, I think it's all about Donald Trump. I think this has little or nothing to do with American national security. If you look at the membership, Russia has joined, France has not. The Brits have said they're still undecided. I don't think we've heard from China yet, but it's not going to have any independence from Trump. It's a Trump creation, and although we haven't seen the precise wording of its charter, it appears that he makes all the decisions and the rest of them are there to rubber stamp it. I don't know what he expects to get out of some of the members. It probably is pandering. I don't know where they're going to get their $1 billion. The latest thought for Russia is that it's going to use $1 billion in frozen assets in Europe and to make them unfrozen so they can pay into Trump's board. I just think this is something that's probably never going to take off.
Ambassador John Bolton, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.